Warning, this episode contains explicit content. Please proceed with caution. Whiskey is an amazing spirit. What I love about whiskey is that no two whiskeys are alike. It goes without saying that knowing the basics is essential. Seriously, what is whiskey? How is whiskey made? What's the deal with the different spelling and the many variations of whiskey? On this week's episode, downtown LA's bar Jackalope manager Stephanie gives us a Whiskey 101 crash course. Let us go to that conversation and see what Stephanie has to say. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Romeo, your host of Whiskey Sex Talk. I'm here with Stephanie, bar manager of Bar Jackalope. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm excited. And by the way, thank you so much for bringing a bottle of this amazing whiskey, or bourbon, actually, to be correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, if it's Whiskey Sex Talk, why wouldn't we be drinking some whiskey right now?
I know. That was very nice of you, by the way, to do that.
I mean, I like to consider it an afternoon bourbon since it is 2:00 here.
Oh, wow.
Something super light and approachable. Basil Hayden is like it's a high rye bourbon. It's usually when people want to start getting into whiskeys and stuff, this is something that's super approachable. So if you're just getting into bourbons out there, Basil Hayden should be your first choice as a recommendation.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm enjoying it. This is really amazing. So before we begin, I just want to ask you, can you just tell us a little bit about your professional background before we begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working in downtown Los Angeles for about 6 years now. Working specifically at Bar Jackalope and 7 Grand for about 5.
Okay.
You know, when people go into the hospitality industry, they kind of stumble upon it. Some people really just want to follow that, but a lot of people stumble upon it because, you know, when you're a college graduate and, you know, you have student loans to pay, you're kind of romanced by the hospitality industry.
True.
Because you get that immediate, you know, instant gratification from getting cash tips in your hand. So I kind of stumbled upon 7 Grand all those years ago. And, you know, I did a lot of things in between. I worked in the film industry. I worked at an agency. I worked on a studio lot. But I just kept coming back to the bar. And I'm Latina, so it's like a big part of my culture is entertaining and hosting.
Nice.
And it's something that I love doing naturally. Like ever since I was a little kid, you know, like my family, like having just like every single Saturday and Sunday, it's like we're hosting people. So it's something that comes natural to me, and I'm an extrovert as well. But I've been working at the bar for about 5 years. I've done every single position in the bar you can think of, from hosting to bar backing to bartending at the main bar for about 1.5 years, and apprenticing and curating at Bar Jackalope, and now I'm the manager there. So everything that I learned about whiskey was from working at that bar. I'm lucky enough to work at one of the best single spirit bars in the entire planet.
It's amazing, by the way.
7 Grand is an institution, for lack of a better word. You know, people come from all over the world to check out our whiskey, and we've been able to replicate such an institution in other locations as well. So if you guys are listening in Austin, Texas, in Denver, Colorado, or in San Diego, California, we have 7 Grands at those locations as well. So I encourage you to go over there and check them out, because all of our bar staff across the board are being molded and curated into the best whiskey experts you can possibly meet. 7 Grand as a culture, and a lot of our other single spirit bars as well, are really focused on education. So if you guys are in any of those cities, I would highly encourage you to go visit your 7 Grand, you know, because as a culture, our bar culture for our company, we're called Pouring with Heart. We really focus on giving our employees and our guests the best education possible. You know, we're curating the next best whiskey enthusiast coming up. Right. So you can start out as a bar back at 7 Grand and potentially become a brand ambassador or start something of your own, you know. So it's definitely one of those places where you go to learn. And we're all very enthusiastic about it. Everything I learned was at the bar. The only way you're going to learn about whiskey is by sheer curiosity.
100%.
Yeah, you can take a course and you can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to become a bourbon steward. But if you're enthusiastic enough and curious enough, you just do the research, go to your local bar, ask your bartender questions, and just sip through the wall and take detailed notes.
And that's, you know, by the way, that's everything you say is, and I'm just telling this to the audience, 100% true, because I think that was the one thing that I love about Bar Jackalope, specifically when the first time I met you. I think I met you and also
Pedro,
my
co-curator.
You guys, I mean, that's the one thing that I look for, is that so many people out there are whiskey experts, but they have like this highbrow type of like way of talking. I'm not that person. I'm like the average person. I love whiskey and I want to know more about it because it tastes good, it feels good, and I like the fact that we can talk, and I want to have a conversation. I don't want to be lectured. By the way, just so you guys know, Stephanie is like hardcore. She knows her facts. Like, she is amazing. She can tell you stories while she's pouring. And really, that's what I loved about, like, when I first asked you, you were just so very informative and in a way where I understood what you were telling me. And even if I didn't, you took your time to explain everything. And I'm glad that 7th and Grand, you have a family, and there's actually, like you said, institution. And there's this like amazing place where people who like whiskey can go and feel not judged, feel that they can ask questions and that you're going to get information, like real information, and not something that someone's ad-libbing. Like, I think I know this.
Or making it up as they
Or
go.
making it up, because sometimes that's what happens. Like, bartenders, just for, they'll do it for the extra cash or extra tip, right?
Yeah.
They'll try to like
embellish.
Yeah, exactly. Things that are not true. And then you go out there and you start quoting, you start saying all this stuff, like, who told you? Well, a bartender. And then people look at you, well, that bartender wasn't telling you the truth. And I think that's very important. I think especially now with the whiskey industry, that is, I feel like it's just getting bigger and more enthusiasts are actually are becoming more, there's more enthusiasts on the, I guess, out there now.
Well, the thing is about whiskey, it's just that it's seemingly at this point limitless in its combinations. So when you're talking about things like mezcal, that's very terroir driven. It's based on a strain.
Oh, is it really?
But it's more comparable to wine. But when you're talking about whiskey, you have to think about, I always say there's about 4 key things that you need to think about when you're drinking whiskey, and why there are so many different variations of it. You got to think about the grain that you're using.
Okay.
You got to think about the water source that you're using.
Right.
You got to talk about the fermentation process.
Right.
You got to talk about distillation.
Okay.
And then lastly, you want to talk about maturation.
Okay.
So those 5 things, there are multiple ways to vary those 5 steps that could ultimately change the flavor of your distillate. So that's why there's so many variations. Like when you're talking about mezcal, people don't age mezcal. They have a way that they cook it. They distill it, and that's what gets put into the bottle.
Really?
It's like a 2-3 step thing.
You know? Wow.
You cultivate your agave, you dig an earthen pit, you distill 2 times at least just to get any of those solubles out, and then you put that in a bottle. So mezcal is a direct representation of the land. Same thing with wine. It's all about the grapes. It's all about the grapes. But when it comes to whiskey, you're thinking about those 5 key things right there. And then lastly, you talk about terroir as well. So at least there's 6 things that you can potentially cover when you're talking about the whiskey process. So those combination of 6 different things, that's why the whiskey world, in my opinion, is so abundant and ever evolving, because, you have these wonderful craft distilleries popping up in America as well, and they're using their local grain, which makes their whiskeys completely unique. So I think that's why the whiskey industry is just growing so much, because there are so many ways to vary and put your own thumbprint, your own DNA into the whiskey by altering one of those 6 things that I just listed.
So it's like you're almost the process of, it's almost like chemistry, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Whiskey making is all science. So if we're talking about Whiskey 101, we have to start with a beer. All whiskey starts out as a beer, no matter what.
Really?
Absolutely. If you wanted to buy a 6 case of Bud Lights and order a little copper pot still online, you could distill that Bud Light into whiskey.
No
100%.
way.
Seaway, I'm telling you.
Really? So can you explain exactly? So what do you mean, like, everything starts off as, like, first it starts off as a beer?
So a beer essentially is going to be water.
Okay.
Whatever grain you're using. So let's talk about grain here. You can use corn, rye, wheat, barley, unmalted or malted. Literally anything that you can mash into and expose their fermentable sugars for the yeast to feed off of, you can distill and make it into whiskey. I know that there's a distillery in Chicago called Koval that uses a little bit of quinoa in their 4-grain mix. Yeah, absolutely. As long as you find a grain that has enough fermentable sugars for the yeast to eat. So the thing is, it's like, it doesn't matter what grain it is. As long as you can ferment it into a beer, you can distill it off and make it into whiskey. So at its base, whiskey starts out as a beer. So you take your grain. Let's take bourbon, for example.
Okay.
Bourbon legally has to be 51% or more corn.
Okay.
And then the other 49%, they can use whatever they want. That's the thumbprint that I was telling you about.
Okay, right.
So legally 51% or more corn for bourbon, but you can use a wide array of other things to supplement that other 49%. Think about it. That's almost half,
Right, yeah.
So something that's really popular for bourbons is using wheat as their flavor grain, much like Maker's Mark does.
Right.
And the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, everything from the Buffalo Trace Distillery is using wheat, winter wheat in particular, winter wheat meaning it's only from that season. But you can add anything else. You can add rye, you can add malted barley. The whiskey that I brought for you today, Basil Hayden, it follows a traditional mash bill. So it has corn, rye, and malted barley. That's a beautiful trio. That's an easy way to make a bourbon. But the thing is, you change the identity of your bourbon by switching up those percentages. So are you using 35% rye and then the rest malted barley, or are you using 35% malted barley and the rest rye? So that's when you can start tweaking things. So we talk about grain.
Right.
Grain, so you take any grain that you want.
And this is during the fermentation process?
This is at the base of it. So you choose your grain, you choose your mash bill, that's what we call it, the combination of grains that you want to use. You want to use 35% rye, 10% malted barley, and the rest corn. That's your mash bill. That's essentially the recipe. So once you figure out your mash bill, you're going to take your grain, you're going to put it in a big fermentation tub with hot water and yeast.
Okay.
So yeast is very important as well. So yeast essentially is just bacteria that exist. So I like talking about yeast because yeast functions a lot like humans do. Think about who you were when you were 13 years old.
Okay.
And the kind of clothes you wore and the kind of music you listened to.
Right.
And then fast track that and think about who you were when you were 18 and how that changed. And think about who you are now. You kept reinventing yourself, right?
Right.
Your identity, the way that you dressed, the way that you talked. Yeast functions in the exact same way. The longer that you let that yeast live, the more it'll keep changing its flavor profiles.
Interesting.
So a normal fermentation process to get the alcohol content that you want doesn't need to run more than 48 to 90 hours. Wow. You can get the desired alcohol content you want after a fermentation that's short. But if you really want to change the DNA of your whiskey, you can let that fermentation process go longer, as long as there's enough sugar for the yeast to be feeding off of. So what's happening in that bubbling kind of cauldron of grain, hot water, and yeast is that the yeast is eating the sugars out of the grain, farting out CO2, and pissing out ethanol.
Oh, right, yeah.
And ethanol is what we know as alcohol.
Alcohol, right.
So that's just science. It doesn't sound pretty, but that's exactly what's happening inside of that fermentation tank.
And you can tweak this. That's what's so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So, like I said, there's sugar inside of corn, there's sugar inside of rye, there's sugar inside of barley. So once you mash that all together with your hot water and you add your yeast is feeding off that and, like I was telling you, producing ethanol. And that's what alcohol is. So once you get your fermentation to where you want it, it's totally up to you, totally up to the master distiller at hand. You take it out of the fermentation tank and you put it through a still. So either a copper pot still or a column still. If you're using a column still, it runs continuously. You can kind of keep that bad boy running day in and day out.
And that's the distillation process that we're getting into,
We're getting into the distillation process now. So now that the beer has been made, the yeast has fed off of the grain and produced, let's say, a beer that's 6 to 7% out.
So like your average beer.
6 to 7% by volume. Okay. So once you've gotten your beer to that desired state, you can take it to the distillation process now. So when you're running that beer through a still, what it's doing is it's removing the alcohol vapors from the solubles. So those alcohol vapors rise faster through the still and then cool faster as well. So that's what ends up on the other end of your still. So think about the separation of alcohol vapors from the solid. Like think about all the grain that's in there as well. So the alcohol vapors rise higher than the solubles do. So that'll go straight through the still and cool down the other end and drip out as clear whiskey.
Wow. And what happens to the remaining to the
Well, you can distill it. Well, that's pretty much spent.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it depends on some of the distilleries. Like I know Maker's Mark for a fact, they some of their grain that they have, they'll give it back to other farms and use it as food for some livestock.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
and
good.
Yeah,
That's really
absolutely.
good. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, like that kind of stuff, depending on what you have. Like if you're distilling at home, you can use it as compost.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so things like that. I mean, it can definitely be reused again, and it's up to the distillery what they want to do with it or not.
So I didn't mean to cut you off.
Please.
So by the way, you're really like, thank you so much for explaining it, because it's so, trying to explain whiskey is like, reading it can be confusing, and the fact that you're explaining it and you're painting a picture for us. So after the distillation, then it goes into this.
So usually into maturation, but for most whiskeys, there's going to be a double distillation happening.
Okay.
That's just how it is. You make sure, like, I want to say, like, the majority of all whiskey productions are doing a double distillation. You're just making sure that you're refining that spirit. When you're talking about, Irish whiskey, they do a triple distillation. So at that point, you're stripping a lot of the oils and you're just leaving like a really beautiful base ethanol for the wood to do most of the work.
So the maturation is that we're all like, everybody gets a little bit more creative. Tell me more about, because I feel like that's the most interesting. Everything is, but here's where everybody tries to play kind of like.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say like 60% of the flavor that's coming from your whiskey, if not more, is coming from the barrel that you're using.
Now, is the color also due to the barrel?
Absolutely. So all whiskey, when it comes off of the still, is clear. We call it white dog. White dog. Yeah. And it's basically, it's like moonshine, essentially.
Wait, it was the same, yeah, moonshine.
It's just like moonshine. So the color that you get from your whiskey, it comes all from the barrel. There are some distilleries around the globe that are legally allowed to use like 0.99 undisclosed ingredients. And, it's been a big tradition in the history of whiskey to use coloring and additives. Even though the brand doesn't necessarily have to be completely transparent about it, if you ask one of their brand reps, they have to say yes.
Oh, they have to
no.
disclose, exactly.
They have to disclose.
Now, is there like a certain like general whiskey in the past? How has it been done originally? Like, as far as like the maturation of the whiskey, like there's a 3-year minimum, right? That the whiskey has to be in the cask for.
So every type of whiskey has its own specifications that they follow. So for bourbon, it has to be aged, legally, for it to be considered a bourbon, it has to be 51% or more corn and aged for a minimum of 2 years in new charred American oak barrels.
Okay.
That's just bourbon across the board. If you're talking about Kentucky straight bourbon, it has to be, 51% or more corn, aged for a minimum of 4 years in new charred American oak barrels, and it can't be bottled at under 80 proof, and it can't be put into the cask at under 120. So bourbon is one of the most highly regulated categories of whiskey. And that's just...
Why is that? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. We'll get back to that, why it's one of the most highly regulated categories of whiskey. But whiskey doesn't start in America.
Right.
Whiskey starts in Ireland.
Right.
I always like to start in Ireland, especially when I'm doing flights at the bar Jackalope, because some of the first recorded history of whiskey making has been found in Ireland. So the word whiskey, as we know it now, comes from a Gaelic phrase that is called Ishkibetha, which is water of life.
Yeah.
So ishki, whiskey is the word that we use now. So we know that, that the Irish learned distillation practices from the Moors. So Ireland is really rich in history. Ireland used to be one of the biggest producers of whiskey in the entire world. They were everybody's competition, but there was a lot of things that plagued them. A colonization, a war, a famine, and, just bad business, essentially. But like I said, that water of life, Ishkibetha, when we're talking about Irish whiskey, they're always using barley. So we talked about bourbon, they're all about the corn. But in Ireland and in Scotland, they're all about the malted barley. That's what grows in abundance in those countries. So you're using the grain that's readily available to you. When we're talking about Japanese whiskey, they don't have the kind of terrain that grows sacred grains like we do. So they're importing all their malted barley from Ireland or Scotland.
So they're not using like rice for their...
They can, absolutely. There are some rice-based Japanese whiskeys, but anything from the Suntory and the Nika distilleries, they're importing the majority of their their grain from Scotland.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like I said, so bourbon is highly regulated. Irish whiskey has to be triple distilled. That's their thing, and produced in Ireland. For Scotland, they have to use malted barley and age it for a minimum of 3 years legally in Scotland to be considered a Scotch. And Japan is a wild, wild west of whiskey.
That
they ain't got
sounds
no
exciting.
regulations.
Really?
Yeah, they don't have no regulations in terms of what you can label as Japanese whiskey. They can get grain from anywhere in the world, but as long as it's aged in Japan for a minimum of 2 years, they can put a Japanese whiskey label on it, no problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's probably Japan right now is like, that's what's happening right now. There's probably a lot of up and coming
distilleries.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The thing is that what we've seen more of in terms of Japanese whiskeys are rice-based distillates. They're kind of going back to their roots. And essentially what it is, it's like shochu or sake that's been aged in a barrel. Because, Suntory and Nikka, there's a huge shortages right now. So when we talk about Nikka and Suntory, I mean, the grandfather of, those distilleries arguably is Masataka Taketsuru, who is a Japanese man from a family of sake makers. After the First World War, like around 1919, he studied organic chemistry at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. So he was obsessed with trying to learn how to make whiskey. So he knocked around at a lot of distillery doors, found one in Campbelltown. And the only reason he stayed there is because that facility had a microscope. He was obsessed with the science about it.
Wow. And, and it really does come down to
So,
science.
yeah. And he studied there. He brought all of his stuff back to Japan. And he opened up Suntory,
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of other components into that story. But just in layman's terms, he learned everything about whiskey making from Scotland. So a lot of the Japanese whiskeys from Suntory and Nikka are made in a Scottish style, for sure.
So, now since we're on this topic, I've seen whiskey with a Y, K-Y, and I've seen whiskey with a K-E-Y.
Yeah.
Now, does that have to do with the fact that they're from different regions, different places where it's origin? Because, can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to first start off by saying that if you're really worried about the E or the lack of an E in a whiskey, you're doing it wrong. You should just care about what's in that glass.
Right, yeah. No, I just noticed that,
yeah, I know. But some people, I've had people get hung the fuck up on
really?
that E. And
just on that?
Yeah, just on that.
So do they
and
think
I'm
it's like
just taste the fucking whiskey.
They think it's
it's good, I promise. But there's history behind that as well. So like I was mentioning before, once upon a time, Ireland was the fucking powerhouse of the whiskey makers. I want to say 70% of the whiskey that was being drunk in the world at that time was coming out of Ireland.
Wow.
But
that's cool.
So and at that point, everyone spelled their whiskey without an E. So we got to think about whiskey happens in Ireland and in Scotland before it happens in America.
Okay.
So in Ireland and Scotland, Ireland is dominating, but at this point they're both using it sans the E, okay, without the E.
Okay.
And then there was a legal act that passed where Scottish distillers were able to use a blended Scotch. So blended Scotch became legal instead of doing it batch by batch, and they were allowed to use grain whiskey and malted and single malt whiskey blended together. And the Irish were like, hell no, that's not real whiskey. That's not how you do it. If you want to make whiskey, you got to use barley only. Who are you to fucking use grain and blend it with your malted barley? That is fucking blasphemy. So as a clapback, they put the E in there because theirs is exceptional whiskey.
Oh.
It was a marketing tactic. It was just you need to drink our whiskey. It has the E in it because it's exceptional. We're not blending it with grain whiskey. We're still doing it the legit way and only using barley for us. So that's where it kind of came about. And then fast forward when we have the Irish and Scottish immigrants coming in after the Revolutionary War in America. There's some distilleries like Old Forester does it, Dickel does it, Maker's Mark does it. They have the whiskey written without the E.
Yeah,
and essentially it's because they're paying homage to their ancestors. Because after the Revolutionary War, the American government didn't have the means to pay their soldiers for their work. So as a solution, they were like, hey, setting up here in Kentucky, whatever. They're like, we can give you this 10-acre piece of property. You can build a house and you can be a landowner. And that was their way of paying back their soldiers. But these guys didn't know what to do with their grain except for eat it. They were just eating their corn. They didn't know how to distill. It wasn't until the Irish and Scottish immigrants came over with their little copper pot stills, this beautiful disruptive piece of technology. And they're like, hey, I know it's not barley, but did you know that you can make some fucking whiskey out of this grain?
No
like I said.
freaking way.
Yeah,
That's like drunk history 101 right there. A little bit.
Yeah.
That's great. I didn't know. I had no idea.
So you got to think about the timeline that way.
Right.
You know, it's just like all of the action was happening in Ireland and Scotland because, like I said, the Moors that were on that side of the globe taught them how to distill. That's where, like, I mean, at the base of everything, the Moors were the first people who knew how to distill. But the first whiskey records were found in Ireland. So all of that kind of translated into the new America. Like I said, all after the Revolutionary War, all those immigrants coming into Kentucky, they were the ones who showed the Americans that, like, hey, you don't have to just eat this. You can also get piss drunk.
That's so crazy. So I'm assuming that, so now we're entering a point where variation starts to come into the fold. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that there's malt, grain, and blended, correct?
Yeah. So grain essentially is anything that's not barley.
Anything that's not barley. And malt is like...
Malted barley.
Malted barley. And then blend is just a mixture.
A mixture of both.
Now, do people prefer certain... Because are certain types of whiskey sweeter or more like smoky? Or is that just a preference of how everything is done?
Well, the thing about whiskey is that there's no wrong answers when it comes to whiskey. Our ability to taste and smell is based off of our memories. So say I was sitting down with someone from, let's say, Japan.
Right.
And we had the same whiskey in front of us. And I smelled it, and I was like, oh, wow, this smells like blueberries. That guy next to me is going to be like, what the fuck is a blueberry? Like, it's not something it's not something that's part of their repertoire, you know? It's just like we have different ways of smelling and, you know, tasting the world. Like, you know, we only have so many senses to understand this world with. And, you know, when you grow up in a different time and place, you know, it's just like that affects the way that you taste your whiskey. So preference is completely subjective. But when we taste together, you know, it's an opportunity for us to understand, you know, ourselves and what we like and what others like and how they, you know, approach and view that world or whiskey, you know, because we can have opposing things and the power of suggestion is really strong. I can like smell a glass and be like, oh, it smells like peanut butter cups, huh? And you're like, oh yeah, I think I get that. Yeah. But when you drink together with your friends, like at the bar Jackalope, like how we do, we encourage people to come together because it's good to have that kind of tension. You know, it's just like, I love this whiskey. And the person sitting next to you is like, oh, why? That fucking sucked. And it teaches you more about yourself. You're like, oh, I guess I like flavors that are a little bit more, you know, corn-based. Right. Like, say you're like a big fan of bourbon and your friend's like, oh, I can't do this bourbon. But then they try an unpeated scotch and they're like, oh, this is the spot. This is home. Money. Yeah. So, you know, like when you taste through whiskeys, try to identify, like, what is it you like about that whiskey? Is it the grain? Is it corn, rye, the barley that's standing out to you? Is it the barrel? Is it a sherry barrel? Is it a rum barrel? Is it a cognac barrel that it's being aged in? You have to be able to identify those little things. So when you go through your whiskey, when you're going through your whiskey journey, I know it's hard for some beginners. We always like to say to start out with some food words, but if that's kind of hard for you to kind of grasp, think about colors or think about memories. Like, oh, this smells like one day, like, I mean, it could be a bad memory too. It's like, I remember I came home one day and my uncle was really drunk and I can't drink this whiskey because it reminds me of him, you know?
Right, yeah.
Or something like that. Or it's just like, oh, I had this like incredible moment. Like we were sitting by a bonfire and we were just like all drinking this whiskey and that's what it reminds me of, you know? So it can be a time, a place, a color, a taste, you know?
So it really comes down to what your olfactory, your taste, everything. It's experience. It's an experience.
It's a case-by-case basis. So, I mean, we have glasses in our hands right now. Let's go ahead and walk you through it.
Yeah.
So,
I think I might need a little bit of...
Yeah.
If you can give me...
Please do.
So, ladies and gentlemen, she brought Basil Hayden's. This is amazing. I think it's sweet. I mean,
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
And I love what you said. This is a perfect whiskey for an afternoon.
Oh, yeah. It's an afternoon bourbon. So, a lot of the times when people are drinking whiskey, they make the grave mistake of just using their nose. And it's kind of counterintuitive because can we say like, oh, okay, nose the whiskey now, but you're not really nosing the whiskey. So what you want to avoid doing is sticking your nose in that glass and just whiffing through your nose. Like, never do that. And if you do that and smell something, I'm going to call bullshit because
And you see people like that
Oh
at
yeah,
bars. Like,
absolutely.
oh,
And they're like,
it's just...
oh, I'm getting this and I'm getting that, and it's just like fucking bullshit. And I'm like, all you're getting is astringency, because it's true. You know, like when you see wine drinkers, you see them kind of swirl their glass very aggressively. You don't really want to do that too much with whiskey because it has such a high alcohol content. So if you're just agitating the shit out of that whiskey, you're just going to release the, you know, you're just going to release like the astringency,
right,
essentially.
astringency, yeah.
So it's a little counterintuitive. You do want to put your nose deep in that glass, but after you do that, you want to let your mouth do all the work. So you're going to part your lips and breathe in very gently through your mouth and not through your nose.
Okay.
So when you do that, it actually cools the alcohol vapors against the back of your palate, and you can actually kind of taste that whiskey before it even touches your lips.
Yeah.
So go ahead and spit out some food words. What are you guys getting on this whiskey?
Maple.
Yeah, maple. I'm getting like wheat, like pancakes.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Vanilla.
What about you? What are you getting over there?
Mr. Producer.
Mr. Producer. Bo. You smell the wood. So you're getting oaky. So you're getting an oaky quality from it. Okay,
Wow.
fantastic. See, on this Basil Hayden, I get like a little bit of a floral quality.
Yeah.
So rye is really grassy, floral. And a lot of people don't understand that bubblegum is actually a floral quality. So I get a little bit of bubblegum on this
I've
as
had
well.
that experience where I've smelled whiskey and it smells like...
And then go ahead and tap it over your tongue and see how that experience changes for you. You know, sometimes our minds will be tricky. Sometimes you might love the way a whiskey smells and hate the way it tastes, you know?
That's so good.
That's so nice.
It's
Like I
really,
said, it's
really...
super easy sipping. Like the back end on that whiskey is all the rye. You know, it's like that hay, like floral kind of grassy thing. Tip of your tongue is caramel, but the way it finishes at the back, super grassy.
And it's almost like oil, like what is it?
Oily,
like a little oily.
Yeah, I mean the thing. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. When you think about whiskey, you got to think about texture as well. You know,
yeah, it has like that little like
a little bit of oiliness. That's totally fine. Textures of whiskey is completely varying. Like there's a lot of bourbons that can be very drying because they've been in the oak for so long. You know, it's just like very tannic, and it'll just like dry you out completely.
I've had that experience too.
But some people love that. Some people, they're like, I want the oakiest whiskey. I want the oakiest whiskey you have back here. Like I want the fucking stump in my mouth. Like
really,
some people love that. Like I said, it's all subjective. It's just like when you go through your whiskey journey, try to identify the things that you like, and then explore that even more.
So I have one question to also know. What's this whole cask strength thing that I hear?
So cask strength essentially means that the whiskey hasn't been diluted with any water before it's gone into bottling. It's straight from the barrel into the bottle.
So is that like a pricier, or is that? I feel like cask strength.
Usually cask strength whiskeys are going to be a little bit up on the price for sure. I mean, unless the bottle says cask strength or barrel proof on it, every single whiskey you've had in your life has had the addition of water to it.
Okay.
So when you're talking about making a consistent product, I mean, this is what the master distiller does, you know, making sure you have a consistent product. So say you order a Jack Daniel's No. 7 at a bar in California. You know exactly how it tastes. Say you're in Ireland and you order a Jack Daniel's No. 7, it has to taste exactly the same. So the master distillers have this fucking beautiful way of working, and they take barrels that are aged the same amount of time, but barrels that are sitting in a rack house, that's what we call a whiskey aging warehouse, a rack house. Mm-hmm. There's different temperature variances in the rack house. Obviously, the higher you go, if you're talking about Kentucky or Tennessee, it's much hotter on the top levels of the rack house. So barrels are an organic piece of matter. They breathe and they move and they contract and they expand. So barrels on the rack house that are on the top floor expand more, and then the whiskey seeps into that wood a little bit more. So there's more whiskey to barrel contact, whereas the barrels at the bottom floor of the rack house are much cooler and don't expand so much during the day. So even though you laid down two barrels at the exact same time, if one's on the bottom and one's on the top, after 7 years, they're going to taste wildly different. So you still have the same age on that whiskey, but like I said, they're going to be wildly different. So what the master distiller does is take those barrels that have all these variances and blend them together to a consistent product. And making a consistent product also means adding water to it. So adding water to your whiskey does a lot of different things. It can open up some really beautiful flavors. You can add a drop or two of water. Say you have cask strength whiskey in your glass at home right now. Take a straw or a water drop or whatever you have, add a couple drops in. Swish it around a little bit. It'll start to open up some flavors that you might have not noticed the first time around. That's what water does. It exposes different molecules. So like Jack Daniel's #7 for me, it tastes like banana cream pie. But when you try the cast strength version of Jack Daniel's, you don't get that banana at all. The addition of water helps that flavor come out. So, and the thing with whiskey is that if you add water, you can't take it out. So say you add 2 drops of water and you're like, oh, this is tasting really good. And then you add 4 more and then you're like, ooh, this actually doesn't taste that good anymore. But you can keep adding water and get it back to that kind of like whiskey homeostasis where you like that flavor again. So it happens. It's a gradual thing. You can add some water, love the taste, go a little bit further, hate the taste, but then go a little bit further after that and then mellow it back out again. So every whiskey you have, like I said, it's going to be blended together with a bunch of barrels of the same age to make a consistent product.
That's very interesting because I recently did a tour of a distillery in Israel, and they took out, it was the whiskey from the cask, and
they're using a whiskey thief.
And they actually asked us, they told us if we wanted to put a couple of drops of water because it's a little, they were like, it's a little strong.
Yeah.
It's a little strong.
I mean, cask strength whiskey is going to be anywhere in between like 110 and 133. So, I mean, when I was in Kentucky last week, I mean, we were drinking straight from the barrel, 127, 128 proof stuff, and I was a happy fucking camper.
I know. I was pretty lit. I'll tell you that. I was pretty lit.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the thing is, like I said, we were talking about the addition of water and stuff, and it's just like you're just going to smell different things with or without the addition of water. You can smell stuff, you can smell things at cask strength that you can't smell at when it's been brought down to proof and vice versa.
Well, that kind of sucks because there's probably, let's say like you tasted something at cask strength, and then you go and you tell your friends, "Oh, this is amazing! It tasted like this," and they try the final product, and it's a different thing. I mean,
well, I mean, at the end of it, at the end of the day, it's gonna have some differences for sure. But that's, I mean, you got to think about it. The history of whiskey, people weren't like really releasing cask strength stuff.
Right.
It's only like right now that we have the ability where like people want to try stuff that's at cask strength. You know,
well, it's very artisanal. I feel like it gives it that kind of like, oh, it hasn't been
it's just
untouched,
different variances.
You know?
But you know, like at the end of the day, to be the devil's advocate here, there's some people who don't want to drink whiskey that's high proof like that. They want it mellowed out. How many times have you gone to a bar and seen people dilute their whiskey?
I haven't paid
I want it
attention.
over rocks. I want it on ice.
Yes.
I want it with Sprite. I want it with Coca-Cola. Thing is that you should drink your whiskey the way you want to drink it. And sometimes people don't want to drink cask strength. They're like, fuck that. I'm like, I don't want to do 133. And it's just like, I'd rather go with something that's at 80 proof. So it's like there's a bigger market for people who want to drink stuff that's been brought down to proof versus the stuff that's at cask strength. Only like the true people that are like fucking like into it are going to be like, give me the cask strength. Yeah.
Right. And even then, some people might, like you said, they might not like that. Yeah. Now, what's one advice you give our listeners when they're starting off for whiskey? A couple of little things that they should keep in mind, just so they can go out there and you know, just kind of like put, you know, just be more.
I would say to never judge the whiskey on the first sip. Just because when you drink whiskey, every whiskey you're going to have is going to be over 40% by volume. And once you take that first taste, your tongue is going to be kind of in shock. It's going to be like, whoa, what are we doing? What? What'd you just do to me? So it's like, whiskey takes a long time to make, so you should take your time drinking it as well.
Beautiful.
Especially as a beginning whiskey drinker. You got to let yourself train your palate, because the first time you sip whiskey, you might not like it. It's like coffee. Did you like the first sip of coffee?
I don't think so.
No one.
Unless it had a lot of sugar.
Exactly. No one liked their first sip of coffee. Same thing with whiskey. I mean, it's just like people either have an affinity or a liking to specific spirits for different reasons. But you just got to be able to explore and not judge the whiskey on the first sip. That's what I'll always say. Make sure that you're hydrating in between. Maybe open like a little nibble of food or something, like some nuts or some fruits or some chocolates, you know, and let your palate kind of open up to different flavors. Because if you can't get anything from the whiskey alone, take a little bite of food and then take another sip and let your palate be open to how that can change, you know. It's just like if you introduce fatty things into your palate while you're drinking whiskey, it'll stick to those fat molecules inside of your tongue, you know, and it'll linger, and it's like, it's a science. It really is. So never judge it on the first sip. Take your time with it. Don't shoot it. And then once you identify why you don't like it, then move on to a different category of whiskey. I always say try the 4 corners of the whiskey world. Try an American whiskey, an Irish whiskey, a Japanese whiskey, and a Scotch whiskey.
Nice.
So you can kind of identify like, oh, like I tried a Scotch from Islay. I had Lefroy and I hated it. It was way too smoky.
Yeah.
But you're like, I tried this Japanese whiskey from Nika that is using Scotland barley and some peat as well. And I like that more because it's a different, like you have to be able to identify those small, minute things. You know, it's just like, and it goes back to the end of the day, those basics. Think about the grain. Do you like the corn flavor? Do you like that barley flavor? Do you like that rye flavor? Do you like that wheat flavor? Then think about maturation. It's just like, do I like it because it's new charred American oak barrel? Do I like it because it's a sherry barrel? Do I like it because it's a rum barrel finish? And then talk about age. It's just like, oh, like this 4-year-old wasn't really that good, but this 16-year-old was way mellowed out and it was really nice and easy for me to drink. A lot of people think a lot of the time like an older age statement means like the whiskey's going to be more robust. Mm-hmm. It's actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's going to be way more mellowed out.
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say to think about those things going forward for sure. And like identify those little minute things, take notes, take detailed notes, revisit whiskeys that you thought you hated. And then taste whiskeys blind. That's something that I always say. Let your friends pour your whiskey and don't ask them what it is. And let the integrity of the whiskey in the glass speak for itself. Because a lot of the time I found that people romance labels.
True.
You know, it's just like, it goes back to the Jack Daniels thing that I was telling you earlier. So we have a single barrel of Jack Daniels at cask strength, exclusive to 7 Grand at our bar and at Bar Jackalope. And when people tell me, they're like, oh, I fucking hate Jack Daniels, this and this and that, I put it in blind in their flight. And I want to tell you, 99% of the time that I've poured that whiskey for someone, they're like, this is incredible. What is this? And I was like, booyah, bitch, it's JD. And it's just like, no. And I'm like, yes. So, you know, like I said, our mind will trick us. Sometimes your palate will be off some days, you know, it's just like, depends like if you're a smoker or if like, you know, like it just, there's a bunch of little different things. Like if you have like a weird sinus thing or like, you know, that you have like a deviated septum, like you have to just be prepared for the fact that you might have off days with your palate. And that happens to us all the time. You know, the best way to reset is not drinking for a few days, you know, making sure you're eating a lot of clean food and then like, you know, getting like plenty of air, fresh air, you know, like that's the easiest way to reset your palate and stuff. Don't drink heavily the night before. You want to do a tasting that's like, you want to take detailed notes on or something like that.
That's beautiful advice. I wish I had that advice when I was. I'm still new to it, but that's very great advice because we've all had those horrible experiences with certain whiskeys, especially when we were younger. You know, but listen, you have a podcast of your own as well, correct?
Yeah, we do. So our company. Pouring with our, so at 7 Grand, we're a single spirit bar. At Bar Jackalope's single spirit bar, meaning that we focus on one spirit. We focus on whiskey. But we also have a rum bar and a mezcal bar.
Correct, yeah.
And we host community forums every single week where we invite brand ambassadors and master distillers to come in and educate us on their lines of whiskey. And we call ourselves the Spirit Guide Society podcast. Right. So it's not as formal as this is. We don't like sit down face to face and do a one-on-one. What we do is we just strap a mic on whoever's presenting that day and we produce a podcast out of the live recordings. So that approach is really dynamic because you kind of get feedback from the audience as well. So you can potentially get a group of 10 friends. It's less like you buy a bottle, you buy a bottle, you buy a bottle. Let's come together. Let's sit down and let's taste through this whiskey with you guys. So it's like, it's possible for you to do it at home listening to one of our podcasts. A lot of the stuff that we have is readily available in your liquor stores. It is.
And you guys are very informative, by the way. I love how you guys present that. And that's how I think I met you. That's how it all came to be.
Yeah, that's how you came in. You came into the Whiskey Society.
Because I was originally a rum, I was a member of the Rum Society. And then I got the email recently for the exceptional whiskey, and that's how it all started. And by the way, for everybody out there, if you guys really want to have that amazing experience, go visit Stephanie and Pedro. I want to call him Peter, but it's Pedro.
It is Peter.
Yeah. And Pedro, and you know, just let them know that you heard her on Whiskey Sex Talk, and you will be more than willing to. Like,
absolutely.
them.
I love it. I mean, it's just like it makes my job easy when the whiskey's just so damn good.
I know. You know? Now, if people want to follow you, how can they? If they want to follow you on Instagram?
Yeah. So if you want to go on Instagram and listen to our podcast. Like I said, I think it's one of the most educational whiskey, rum, and mezcal podcasts out there. We're doing it across the board. Like I said, we have master distillers and like some of the most reputable brand ambassadors come in, literally break everything down from history to fermentation, distillation, maturation, and everything in between. That podcast is called Spirit Guide Society Podcast. We're available anywhere that you can listen to any podcast. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at Spirit Guide SOC. For me personally, as a personal Instagram. I'll do a little shout out if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's going to be at supsteph. So SUP_STEPH.
Nice.
And you can follow me on my whiskey adventures there as well.
I know, and it's always great to follow other people, especially people that know their stuff, because you know your shit, girl.
I will say that my personal Instagram isn't like super whiskey focused, but you'll find me fucking around with some shit on there.
Well, that's good,
sure.
and you know, and people can send you messages because I feel like you're very
questions.
informative,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I trust what you're gonna say.
Yeah.
Like I can come to you for anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I have no problem admitting that I don't know something. Like I said,
That's
just to kind of
perfectly
wrap
fine.
around from what we said at the beginning, like there are so many different things to consider when you're making whiskey. Those 5 key things that we talked about.
Right.
Grain, just to repeat them again, grain, water source, fermentation, distillation, maturation. God, I forgot what I was going on there. The basil Hayden hit me.
Oh, nice. Well, that means that's a good type of whiskey. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's Whiskey Sex Talk. Stay tuned for next week's episode.